This lesson will complete our study of the book of Esther. We begin this lesson with chapter 7, and it reads, verse 1. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen, 2. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of my kingdom. So now we've seen Esther dragging out and hesitating, and he's offered her half of the kingdom. This will not be in land, but in what is in the treasury of the king. 3. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request. So this is, at this time, all of Israel had been freed, and it was Daniel who was this king. This Ahasuerus is a generic name for king, as in Pharaoh of that land. Darius was the king, and the person who was over his kingdom for him was none other than Daniel, and there's no record of this. 4. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, to perish. But if we had been sold for bondsmen and bondswomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. So if this goes on, she would say, Oh, king, you would be losing subjects. 5. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? Who is he, and where is he? Contains an acrostic. Ea Asher Ea, I am, in the Hebrew. This is the fourth thumbprint of God in this book. And even though it is not widely taught because God is not mentioned, that is true. The word Hebrew is not mentioned, but God has his thumbprint on it, and it is for us to learn. His name is in acrostic several times. 6. And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. Special little banquet just for the king, Esther, and Haman. 7. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw there was evil determined against him by the king. So he's walked out, and this phrase, evil, begs for his life, and to Esther, and there was evil determined against him, contains an acrostic, once again, of God's name. 8. Then the king returned out of the palace garden, and into the palace of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in my house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And this is made to look as though he is trying to force the queen. And if we look at Revelation 2nd chapter 20 through 23, Jesus is speaking through John the Divine, who talks about the great Jezebel, the great harlot of the end times. And then Asha, I am, when he returns to Jerusalem, and that will be when the power changes. 9. And Harbinah, one of the chamberlains, and said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. 10. To complete this chapter. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Chapter 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. So Esther has told. 2. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it into Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Okay, the king in the book of Daniel does not take off his ring. In fact, he uses his ring to seal that lion's den. And never ever in history is there any mention of Haman or Mordecai. Verse 3. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. So she is making another plea. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. If we went into the king unannounced, the only way that one would avoid death would be if he held out the scepter, and he has done so. And said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces, 128, according to this writing. So you would have had 128 letters out, and wonder if they were all over the known world, why no copy of such a letter exists in history. 6. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come upon my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? 7. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew — he isn't a real Jew, he tried to trace his ancestry to the house of Benjamin, and it doesn't hold. Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he had his hand upon the Jews. Verse 8. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, for the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man perverse. So he's to do a letter that will go out all over and sealed with the king's ring. And it doesn't hold up that Darius gave up his ring. Verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at the time of the 3rd month, that is, the month of Sivan, on the 23 day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants and the deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. 127 provinces, and in some 70 languages. Not a record of it anywhere. However, Babylonian history documents the flood. Where are these letters? 11. Wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province, that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of all for a prey. So he has going to put a foreigner over and say, your people can kill mine, doesn't add up. 12. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month Adar, 13, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Once again, published to all. Well, now the stage is set. 14. So the people that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. Once again, this is never, ever mentioned. But we have a complete historical record of what it went on in Shushan. And it was not Mordecai, it was not Haman, it was Daniel. 15. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. Notice that once again Israel is not mentioned, and Hebrew is not mentioned, and Eudus, Jew, would be either a resident of Judea or a descendant of Judah. 16, the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. 17, to conclude this chapter, and in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. How do you become a Jew? You are either of the house of Judah or you reside in Judea. Chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, although it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. 2. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell on all the people. Who are they fearing? Are they fearing God? No, they are fearing Mordecai. 3. And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and the deputies and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them, not the fear of God. 4. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Where is Daniel? He was over King Darius's kingdom, as we have noted. 5. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. 6. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. Okay, and then we're going to have a list of names. Strangely, the names are in columns. Nowhere else in the Bible, in the original manuscripts, are names listed in columns. And Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Paratha, Adaliah, and Aridatha, and Parmashtha, Arisahai, and Aridai, and Vajizatha. So these are these sons. Now, some of those names mean given by prayer, swift, fire god, superior, iron-like, strong like the wind. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. So they didn't take anything in spoil from these persons. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. 12. And the king said unto Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men at Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman, which have they done in the rest of the king's provinces. Now what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done? Now these are impaled and dead, the sons. They have been run through. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. So they're going to hang all 10 sons on this gallows, and they're already dead. So this would be for public spectacle. 14. And the king commanded it to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons, who are already dead. 15. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hand. So once again they took no spoil. Now, Daniel would hardly have allowed that. So you've had 800 persons in one city here. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. 75,000 people have been killed, and it's not recorded anywhere in history. Now, maybe in the Talmud. Now, God's everything in the Word has 2 witnesses. This has not a second witness. 16. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and we did that one. That is about the 75 unbelievable thousand. 17. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested day, and they made it a day of feasting and gladness. 18. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the, we did that one, 19. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, with a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And this still holds. It is called a feast and a holiday on the Jewish calendar. 20. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far. And this feast is called Purim, and it gets its name from Pur, P-U-R, which is a Persian word which means a stone. 20. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far. None survived. 21. To establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the year daily. So this holiday, Purim, has been established. But it is not mentioned by Jesus or any of the prophets or any of the writers of the New Testament. 22. As the days wherein the Jews from their enemies and from their month, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions to another, and gifts to the poor. 23. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them. Did God order this holiday? 24. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and the Agathite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. Pur, casting of lots with stones. 25. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked decree, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. 25. 26. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the same Pur. Therefore all the words of his letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, which had come unto them. And verse 25, verse 27. The Jews obtained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fall, that they would keep those two according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. And Purim, P-U-R-I-M, is a plural of the Persian word pur, and it means stones. 28. And that those days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. 29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm the second letter of Purim. So we have 2 letters out about Purim. 30. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth. 31. To confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according to Mordecai the Jew and Esther, the queen, had enjoined them as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fasting and their cry. 32. To complete chapter 9. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. What book? Not the Bible, not the Torah, perhaps in the Talmud. Let us look at chapter 10, 3 little verses to conclude this book. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the sea, so they're being taxed, 2. In all the acts of his power and of his might, and of the declaration of the grievances of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Mordecai and Persia? No, they aren't. They are not. Verse 3, to conclude this 10th chapter in the book. For Mordecai, the Jew, was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. Now, the Talmud is a book of oral traditions of rabbis, and it contains civil ceremonial law and legends. There are 2 versions of it. Babylonian in the 5th century and Jerusalem Talmud. Not all people who are today claim to be Jews do rely on the Talmud, but on the Torah. And the Torah, of course, is the Pentateuch, those first 5 chapters or books, of the Bible. And it is considered central and the most important text to those who are of that faith. Now, there are 5 places in this book where God's thumbprint is there. The first one, 2 of them are backward, or rather 3 are backward, and the others are forward. But those letters in the Hebrew manuscript are capitalized. And why is this book here? We are to beware of the Mordecais who pretend to be what they are not. This video has been brought to you by both the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.